is a man who's been struggling with pain and illness literally since the time he was in his first year of life. He's never been without illness. He's probably in his late 60s or somewhere into his 70s. So you're looking at somebody with a very long history of illness, never been without illness, hasn't been without pain really for many, many decades. He was very sickly as a child. He said he started having inflammation and allergies and poor digestion. He said by the time he was a teenager, he said his muscles and joints were in extreme pain. He said he was very inflamed. He said he's really had inflammatory issues since he was little. He said he's never been what you'd call healthy, in a normal sense. As of now, he's had close to 40 surgeries. He has had 7 neck surgeries alone, and he's had fusions of C2 through C6. And when I've checked him out, he barely can move his neck with all the surgical procedures he's had. He's about like this, there's just no range of motion. He's completely rigid, he's completely stiff, can barely walk, can't go up and down steps. He's been in terrible condition. He's had low back surgeries, knee surgeries, mid-back surgeries. Since I've known him, which is just a few months, he's had carpal tunnel surgery since I've known him. And he went in to get stem cell treatment of his knees. He said, my knees are just disastrous. He said, I can't walk, hardly, which he really couldn't. He cannot go up and down steps. And he was really disappointed. He Facebook friended me a few months ago, and I know the church, because it's one of the churches that we teach in, is his home church. So I love the pastors of the church. It's a wonderful church. He's a very devoted churchgoer up in the North Bay. When he was going to get the stem cell therapies, he was convinced that he finally found something that was going to heal him and get rid of his pain. He said, I'm going to walk, I'm going to be flexible, and my pain's going to go away. So he had the stem cell treatment, and he said it made him worse. He said it was the last thing he had. He was so disappointed. He was sure he was going to get better. I have so many Facebook messages from him about how great, high hopes, it's going to be great, it's going to work. And he gets the treatment. He says that for him, it just didn't work. He was so disappointed. So he wears a neurostimulator device in his low back that he wears. It's an electrical device that he said just hasn't been much help. He said he uses it 4 times the amount that he should use it. He said still doesn't do anything. He's on, pain meds. He's on opiates for years. And, he's been addicted to these things, and he said just nothing really helps him. And the words he's used with me is he said, if you knew what it was like to live in my body, he said you couldn't stand it for one day. Nobody could live in my body for a day even. He says unbearable. He's a very determined guy, though. He's successful. He's a successful businessman. He works very closely with his church. He works with other churches. So he's got a real heart for God, but he just hasn't been healed. So we were doing training at his church, and this is now in the last maybe 6-7 weeks. We're teaching at the church. I'm with Dr. Cipriano. So the training is going on, and finally something happened for Dan. He said all of a sudden the pain left his shoulders for the first time in his whole life since he's had this. He said it just disappeared. He said God took the pain away. And he said piece by piece, as we're teaching, God went through his body and took away every single bit of pain in his body. And he said at the end of the session, he faced the church and he said the only thing that hurts is where they did the stem cell treatments, the injections. He said that hurts 20%. He said everything else feels really good. As he's off every medication, he said it's the first time in his life, he said I don't need any medication at all. It's pretty amazing what God's done, because since that happened, I spent a session with him working on range of motion, and his neck all of a sudden, this frozen neck, he's this, and a lot of healing. This is what his hands looked like. They were like big, huge, giant hands, but they were like rocks and concrete. There's no softness of the muscles, and they're gray. It looks very like his like my hands are pink, his hands look like there's just no circulation going down into the extremities. Didn't look very good. So I start working with every articulation of every single part of his finger, every joint articulation, and God starts healing that too. By the end of the evening, he could do this, and he could do this. And that was it. Then it was complete. And the circulation gushed down into his hands, which was really something, because all of a sudden he goes from gray to pink, which is really cool. And his tissues soften up. And he's doing this, and he's doing this, and it's pretty cool. And I hear from Dan the next day. Dan's climbing up and down steps, and he's walking upright, and he's walking well, and he loves to brag. He actually came to one of the churches in Vallejo that I pastor at without me knowing he was coming. He came as a surprise to brag. So he's at the front of the church, and he's showing off his hands, and he's showing everything off and telling everybody his testimony. It was not his church, it was another church. It was really precious.